Thirsty? Stardate 11282024. Impassioned Putts +1 here. Coming to you from our office where we do business things. I have a new filming nook, but we're not in it tonight because there's 2 of us and only one fits. I got a new robe. It's lovely, isn't it? Who doesn't want to be on YouTube in a bathrobe? And we've had some things happen. Dusty was in an accident. We had a crappy Thanksgiving. Thankfully, I left the fudge in the car, so...
More fudge for us.
More fudge for us, so I still have fudge. That's a win. Got to count the wins in life. But we've been going through some things, and Justin... You know, accidents are funny that way. It's like really hard. It increases anxiety. Well, it's like everything. We can look at it in multiple ways. And so he's been having a tough time driving unexpectedly. But also, it lets us look more deeply at things, right?
Yeah.
What are you scared of? Why are we scared of death? And suddenly losing control. Like, we have this idea that we're in control all the time and things should always be a certain way. I was listening to Alan Watts tonight, and he was talking about how when things get too symmetrical, they lose their interest. Like, there's an element of chaos that we really like, even if you think about just watching waves on the beach, right? Every single one hits differently. So you're like, well, is there a right way for a wave to land? Or is one wave right and another wave is a mistake? Like, or is nature always just naturing? And do we really make mistakes? Or is it always a happening that is perfect in its own sort of divine order? And when it doesn't feel good, that's really hard to think that it could be, but we're trying to be really focused, or we are really focused these days, more than we've been anyway, to always view things in a positive light, that good's going to come out of it, even when it doesn't feel or look that way on the front end. So I have a little reading by the Thich, and I was going to read it because it seemed apropos for what we've been experiencing even today and in the world and at work. Mindful communication is what it's called. Today, communication between individuals, families, and nations has become very difficult. However, there are concrete ways to train ourselves to communicate nonviolently so that compassion for one another is awakened and mutual understanding becomes possible again. It is really hard for people to talk, and one thing that's weird about choosing this reading is I've really been noticing that people can't talk. I've been noticing it a lot at work, but it's everywhere in our society. But people aren't telling each other how they feel. It's like if someone sits down and tells you how they feel, you're offended. Or, I don't know, we're just all just telling people what we think they want to hear, but we don't get anywhere that way. And it makes us all liars and stuffing all of our feelings. And yet we're all playing these roles and continuing to do it, even if it's not making us happy or giving us genuine relationships. Like, what's the point of being in a relationship if none of it is genuine and we're just BSing each other all the time? Where's the satisfaction in that? But we're scared. We're really scared to talk with our real feelings. I don't know. What do you think that's about?
People want to hear more real things, but aren't actually talking in a real way.
That's what makes no sense. We talk about authenticity or vulnerability, but I mean, that's a great point. People want to talk truth, or they'll say things like, don't say that behind my back, say that to my face. But are you a space where people can tell you things to your face? Yeah. And no, we're not creating that space, but we still want people to be that brave, but we're not that brave. You want other people to be braver than you are. I will continue. Speaking and listening with compassion are the essential practices of nonviolent communication. And this is reminding me of the video I made about when Israel and Gaza was first happening, how we're dehumanizing other people. And I guess that's so we can be violent in our communication and thoughts about them, because then we don't feel bad. It's okay to be violent. If they're dehumanized, compassion, to his point, increases the humanization in the person that we're speaking and listening to. Mindful communication means to be aware of what we're saying and to use conscious, loving speech. It also means listening deeply to the other person to hear what is being said and what is not being said. We can use these methods in any situation, anytime, wherever we are. For our body to be healthy, our heart must pump a constant flow of blood. For our relationships to be healthy, we need a constant flow of mindful communication. Yet many people, here we go, find it difficult to communicate effectively because they have so much frustration and anger built up inside. Even when we come to another person with sincere goodwill and the intention to listen, if we're unable to use calm, loving speech, there is no hope that the other person will hear us and understand what we're trying to say. I mean, this is huge. For our relationships to be healthy, we need a constant flow of mindful communication. Most people want to speak but not listen, or listen but aren't really listening. Pretend that they care but don't really make people feel seen and heard. And I think we do really well a lot of the time, but we have a breakdown when we get upset. And that happened today for sure. Maybe this is why. Maybe you have a lot of frustration and anger built up inside you haven't been able to get out.
Yeah.
How do you think we get it out? I don't want you to be mad at me, and I don't know.
I'm rarely mad at you. I'm more mad at a situation that has come up that I have no control over, or at myself for how I'm making myself feel, or how I'm looking at something that's making me feel self-conscious about it. It's rarely directly related to you. It's more as though it's just in the situation, and I feel overwhelmed at times.
I think emotions are really overwhelming, especially if you haven't practiced them much. Like, you always seem so calm and happy, for lack of a better way of saying it. I know for me, and I still have a hard time with it, you see that, but I've had, decades of therapy. Imagine me before. But it took me a lot of years to even know what I was feeling before I could even communicate it. And then I know, because there was a lot of anger in what I was around when I was younger, and I don't really vibe with that. I don't really vibe with anger, and I don't think you want to either. Neither one of us is like an angry person. So when you start to feel angry, it gets really overwhelming. And then when you've seen people be completely overwhelmed by anger in your life, it's really scary. We don't tend to have a lot of extreme emotions. So when you have them, it feels, at least for me, anger used to feel really, really out of control. And I mean, I think anger feels out of control for everyone.
I hate the feeling of being angry.
But it's a skill. And like, the more we're skilled at being angry, or we can do it effectively. I don't know if there's skillful anger, maybe. Sounds absurd. But when we're skillful with our emotions, at least we don't vomit them on other people or on ourselves. Like, I think both of us tend to direct anger inward and at ourselves, and then it becomes still destructive. But that feels safer than at other people. So I guess in a way I feel flattered that you're willing to get angry with me. And I know it's hard, but I feel really bad because I don't want to make you mad.
No. And also, to a point from earlier, just the in Dragon Ball Z, that's actually how they...
I love that you're making it. No, you love Dragon Ball Z.
Relevant.
Use it.
It's
Use
relevant.
it.
We were just talking about
I was just talking about a Christmas gift.
And I was just saying how he
loves Dragon Ball Z.
How he turned golden hair is by taking his anger that activated it, and he uses it as a power source.
When he becomes a Super Saiyan.
Yes.
Right? He turns blonde, which is unusual to go from black to blonde.
Yes.
So that's when he's rage-filled, is his
But he
blonde
has to
form.
control that rage, and then it becomes a power source that turns the hair blonde.
So it becomes a source of good.
Yes, but it's not. You have to be able to control that to get into the state of that.
So you're on your way to become a Super Saiyan. You're already golden haired, though. So what will happen when you control your anger in that way?
Well, I guess technically speaking, if we go by the later rules, I guess it would go silver. Anyone that's a Dragon Ball Z fan would understand that reference.
Einstein, what are you doing? Speaking of blondies. Silver?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's much later. You could probably edit that out.
We may intend to use calm and loving speech, but often, why would I edit it out? I've said much worse things on here. Right? This is open communication, just hanging out with us in a real form, in a real way. So we may intend to use calm and loving speech, but often as we start speaking, our pain, despair, and fear emerge. In spite of our best intentions, we start to blame, complain, and judge harshly. Our speech begins to reverberate with the kind of energy that turns people against us because they cannot bear to hear what we are saying. Communication breaks down. When this happens, we need to learn or to relearn how to communicate. How then do we reach the point where we are able to listen deeply to one another and to use loving speech? To do this, we first have to practice taking care of our own pain and anger. By practicing mindful breathing and mindful walking, we strengthen the energy of mindfulness within us. We may need to practice and train ourselves for several weeks or even several months before we can overcome our pain and use loving speech. When our mindfulness is strong, it's much easier to look into a situation and to give rise to understanding and compassion. With the energy of mindfulness, we can overcome our pain and use loving speech. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I guess that meditation is really helpful with that. You could practice some mindful breathing or walking or meditation. That might help in anger. It does tend to help, they say.
Okay.
No? Okay.
That's not a no. It's a my listening.
Mindful. What does mindfulness mean to you?
Being mindful.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping it in mind when you make a choice. That it is not only a valid choice, but one that should be rather weighty on the scale.
Like that. The same is true about our ability to listen deeply. If we've not been able to embrace and transform our own hurt and anger, it will be difficult to listen to another person's suffering, especially if the other person's speech is full of negative judgments, misperceptions, and blaming. If we've not been able to embrace and transform our own hurt and anger, it will be difficult to listen to another's suffering. That's an interesting way to say it, especially if the other person's speech is full of negative judgments, misperceptions, and blaming. I guess that's a different lens to say when people are communicating with hurt and anger. They're communicating their suffering, not really truth about you.
And misperception is also difficult because you can't control how someone interprets what you have told them. Or not told them.
But if you're not getting personally attached to it, he's saying, and if you aren't coming from hurt and anger, or if you've been able to heal those things, then I guess you could just listen to their suffering and understand it's their misperception and their suffering you're hearing.
But something you might avoid talking about might be a trigger for someone else, or a doorway for them to understand you. Because if you have a hang up with talking about a certain subject, you avoid a certain thing while describing something, by omitting that might help you, but then they will have a misconception of what it is you're trying to say. Because you're already aware of that, but they are not. I'm saying that one's a really tricky part of communication.
I mean, communication is tricky because we're listening through our own lens.
Correct.
Or that's a big thing you do in coaching, is learning to just listen and not have a lens, or understanding you always do. And that's why they always teach you to ask questions rather than making statements or saying anything, because we're always going to be putting it through a lens or a filter that isn't the same as the other person's. And when you're trying to serve someone by listening, it's best to just keep them talking in their own world rather than messing it up with, or mixing it up with your own stuff. I think we always sort of misperceive other people. I mean, well, or maybe we're misperceiving ourselves. Maybe
Also
other people, a lot of times people can see us, but we lie to ourselves. I mean, people give themselves away in everything they do. Even what I'm observing at work right now is people, well, and it's always at work. You have it at work too, but where people aren't seeing other people clearly, and then they get really surprised or let down by what they do when it really isn't that surprising. But also, I guess that's a filter of wanting to be right about certain things about people. I've been noticing a lot of people seeing themselves in others. And when you see yourself in someone else, you tend to give them more, well, it depends on your come from, right? But more empathy, or you tend to identify with them or give them more understanding.
And you also might start making more assumptions.
A lot of them, yeah. When a lot of times they aren't just like
a real
you.
double-edged sword. You're starting to feel more for that person, but you're also missing them. It's now more about you.
Yeah, and then you're kind of projecting out what you would want someone to do for you, but they're not you. And so it's easy to get misled with that stuff.
Yeah.
In our heart, we know that listening is what we should do, and no doubt we have often tried our best. Yet frequently, after a few minutes, we no longer can bear to listen to even one more word. We feel overwhelmed. There it is. Even though we have vowed that regardless of the provocation or unjust assertions, we would stay and listen with compassion, we just cannot do it. Our good intentions evaporate because we are unable to handle the pain welling up within ourselves. Yet if we can prevail, I mean, is that what the fear is? I feel like it's when you're having a conversation where it's not combative, but not even confrontational, but just like there's some kind of thing you're going to say that is either very vulnerable or someone may not completely take well. There's all this nervousness. Even I can even feel it when we have sit downs at work. Like I turn red, but half the time I think it's because I'm not as upset, but other people are, and you're just picking up on it. Like we all have this anxiety that raises. I mean, I don't know if it's pain. I don't know what it is. What is the concern with just having an honest conversation? It shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Well, because it's not you. You're not sure what that person's going to do with that information. And especially if it's like a work scenario or a social scenario, it can very easily be used against you. There's a difference between being vulnerable in a relationship or a family. Family can both shelter and harm you, but they're also stuck with you. People at work or in social situations can, if they happen to be in a bad mood, throw it at you again.
Well, and I think the hard part about
that vulnerability has very much weight to be used against you, so you don't want to be as honest as possible.
I think that's true for sure. Well, I also think now that you're listening to you say that, there's also very little follow-up. You know, when you're in a relationship, it's like, or with your family, you continue to work through things because they continue to come up. At work or in social scenarios, it's like you have one conversation and it's never revisited. So it's like we have this conversation and it just sits there. And where I was and who I was in that conversation just stays there. But that wasn't who I was. Either you're processing new information or something's happening. Like it's almost like there needs to be a lot more follow-up. But we rarely get that. Anybody barely has time for that.
That's why everyone usually likes that. We're like a family here. Oh, so the culture must be very welcoming and non-hostile or toxic. But it's not. It's still just a social work environment that can and will be used against you.
Unless people really can express or build the trust to express, which is a rare thing. Because the truth is, I don't think a lot of people want to hear what people really think. They just say they do, which I find really annoying. Don't say you really want to hear it if you don't. And don't say you want it to be this way if you don't.
I mean, I have a large family. Some of them, it's just you don't talk about that topic with that person. It's never going to go well. Never has gone well. Never will go well. But again, that's something you learn with a lifetime, with a collection of people. You don't have that in a social structure or a work structure where if you're with a family, they mostly know your tells. Most of them know your dirty secrets or were involved in them. It's just petty when it's annoying because you have that long-standing relationship. And when you're like married to someone or anything, you have a long-standing relationship that you know it's never going to be like really held against you, only in like when someone is hurt and they wish to hurt back.
I think it's about,
but it's never like casually intended to hurt you. But in a social environment or a work one, it can, because there is no attachment or a long-standing relationship or established boundaries.
Well, the hard part for me in relationships is that it's the cycle of repetition of being in the same scenario over and over again. That's when I get frustrated. Yes. We've had this conversation so many times before, or we've been over it and like nothing's changed. I think that's one thing that for me is frustrating, and that can be at work or anywhere too, where it's just like you continue to find yourself in the same scenario. And a lot of times at work you find yourself in the same scenario because, well, you're not expressing yourself, so we just continue to live out the same things. I don't know, but you're right, it's feeling safe with yourself. To his point, that's the only thing that can allow you to really be an expressed person. Yes. And listen and speak confidently. It says, yet if we can prevail and listen for only 1 hour, the other person will obtain a great deal of relief. Listening with an open heart, we're able to keep compassion alive. Then we give the other person a real chance to express his or her feelings. Such listening requires training and practice. The practices of mindful breathing and mindful walking can help transform the seeds of anger and irritation in us and allow us to open our hearts to listen with love and compassion to the other person. That's what life coaching training really is, but that doesn't, I suppose, help us in our close relationships. But it is a really important thing to listen. That's the conversation I'll be in, is listening.
You're just, again, by being a good listener, but it's also compiling information. Like, you're getting a more broad picture of what's actually happening instead of cherry picking certain information. It's being a good listener is getting the whole picture, and hopefully your understanding with the person is fumbling to try and express, because
yeah, but I mean, we're in a relationship. I doubt you'd say I'm a good listener.
I think you are a good listener. Like 90% of the time.
I don't think I'm doing mindful listening that well. Especially if we're in a heated scenario. I don't think I'm getting credit. I'm not going to give myself credit.
And I'm spending more time not
you also
saying
don't
things
talk.
to get angry, because if I'm angry, I know what comes out of my mouth is going to be hurtful.
But I guess I'd like you to talk more about how you feel, but that doesn't help someone.
So I shut
be
down
a mindful listener
with fear of what I'm going to do. Like, I know that if I am upset, I'm very likely to lash out and say something hurtful that I don't mean. So I would rather just not say anything. And that communication shutdown is not good for Emily's form of communication.
But if I were really a safe space to communicate, you probably wouldn't get that way.
No, it's just because I'm angry. I know I'm going to say something hurtful. I don't care what space I'm in. I'm going to say hurtful things to myself in my own head, let alone aloud. So, like I said, I shut down as a defense mechanism for both myself, because it's just going to escalate. My mind's going to make new things, and it's going to come out with an angry intent, which is not productive.
I think that's just...
Some people just let it fly and then just say hurtful things, and they go and try and apologize afterwards.
No, I don't. No,
some people do.
They do, but that's not your way of it.
It's also a general video.
I just think, yes. I just also think you don't have that much practice at it.
I hate being angry. I've seen lots of terrible things.
That's the problem, is you've seen lots.
Angry.
I had too, and you've seen lots of terrible things, so then for a little while you live it out because it overwhelms you and you think that's the only option. I think you'll get much better at being angry and not lashing out. I don't think that's your nature at all, is to say hurtful things when you're mad. I think you just get overwhelmed and scared. I know I did for a long time. I couldn't even talk when I was mad because I was so afraid of being like what I had seen.
Yes.
But that's another form of punishment to people. Shutting them out or stonewalling is...
Because they don't know. You're not telling them why it is you're shutting down.
Well, and it's just another form of violent communication. And some of us, it's not too violent, but it's lesser violent, but it's still shutting someone out and makes them feel alone. And it's not like I'm a perfect communicator either. It's an interesting thing because, like you said, it's like A heart needs blood to flow to be healthy. A relationship needs communication, yet so many of us are stopped up in this way and don't know how to do it. We're not taught how to do it. We're not taught how to listen or share effectively. We listen personally. We take things personally, hurtfully. I don't know. It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Or you come across as an asshole. Like some people, like, I'm just saying how I feel. Like, no,
Yeah,
that was just
people.
you being a jerk.
Right.
Because again, you can be an active, supportive listener, but also you need to be, it also, I think, touched on also when you express yourself, you also need to be trying to actually express yourself without, like my fear of hurting someone, without actively trying to hurt someone. Like, your intent should never be that when communicating with someone. Just communicate how you feel, and don't try and drag that person into the same thing or feeling the same as you. Just express yourself. And just be mindful of the situation.
A lot of people have a hard time expressing themselves. They don't know what they want to say.
It's true. Or you're just overstimulated with whatever the situation is.
Well, there's being overwhelmed,
Yes.
like you said, with pain. It's interesting he calls it pain. I don't usually think of it that way. I think of it overwhelmed by emotion or something.
Well, I mean, emotional pain.
Yeah.
Being out of sorts is emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
Just varying degrees.
Yeah.
You prick your finger. Yeah, I didn't break my leg, but it's still pain.
That's an interesting way to frame it. Well, definitely a good goalpost to set for being exceptional communicators.
Working on it. Life's a journey, not just a destination.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds stupid, but actually Abraham's analogy for that is the best. It says, well, Esther and Jerry, like, it's like a tubing adventure. You know, you park your car down at the bottom of the river and you take your tubes up to the top. Like, if life is really just about the destination, they'd say, hey, why are we floating down the river? Let's just drive back and put the tubes back in the car and go home. I mean, it's such a great analogy because it really is about floating down the river. You're really doing it just for the journey. It's like at an airport when you go on vacation, you're coming back to the same airport. Why not just skip the vacation and hang out in the airport? We want to go places. We want things to happen. And, you know, I think we have this idea again that if it's not perfect or exactly how we think it should be, but that's not necessarily what we want. And we have to get more comfortable with the mess and the things that are out of control and understand that it's part of it.
I think you made that good point. You have to be comfortable with the mess. If things aren't going exactly to plan, that doesn't mean the whole plan is gone. You have to be comfortable with the mess to wade through to get to what's important.
Well, you have to.
Or you will be overwhelmed easily, and it'll be just more frustrating, and you're just going to sit there and spin and be angry and frustrated, and then you will be shutting people out, and you'll be alone with just you, your frustration and anger, and then you'll be sad because you kicked everyone away.
Well, it's actually your inner being, I guess. You're not connected to your God self as much, and so that's really what makes you feel sad.
I don't see any waiting at all. It's just all good.
Can't always be all good.
You can.
Supposedly. I'm not there yet.
Some
but
days are a little rough.
Looking for the good in it all is definitely helpful, but, you know, like I said, it takes practice. So, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I love you.
I love you.
So it is.
Yeah. Sometimes when I get frustrated, or if I think I heard something super judgmental or hurtful from Emily, one thing that brings me peace is that I stop myself from going down that thought process, and I remember everything Emily says to me is because she loves me. And then I think about how that came from a good place, because she loves me. And that helps me reverse engineer how my anger or the feelings that I was feeling when she said something that upset me, the filter it went through was probably my frustration or anger, and it only picked out parts that were hurtful, and it was not intended that way. Because you love me.
I do love you.
And I know you're only trying to help me. The same way most times you have interaction with someone else is, most of it is to help you, or to help understand what it is that they're hearing or seeing when they're like, are you okay? And you get upset because, like, of course I'm upset, of course I'm not okay, blah blah blah. Like, if I hurt myself, I get upset if people ask if I'm okay. You're like, clearly I'm not. You just saw me get hurt.
Oh, that's fair.
But they're also asking, because most people feel if you can respond,
yes,
you're okay. And that's just the general vibe. I find it annoying.
It's just a panic. Yes.
Other people do it as an immediate check to see if you are okay. Or if you can describe how it is you are hurt, they can help get something for you. But if you just sit there and you're just like, you don't understand, like, you haven't explained anything, and they just saw you get injured, and most people are actually trying to help you.
I've noticed you don't like that, so I don't ask anymore.
I really appreciate that.
I mean, I think, well, communication is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of people don't want other people to know by osmosis or don't want to share, but it doesn't make, at least me, feel included or cared about if someone doesn't share the process with me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want just the destination. I want to hear the process and thoughts, and I don't find talking about the process or thoughts to be a commitment to anything or a definition of the destination. But I think that's a common difference between men and women. I think it's in the book. I have Men Are From Mars, Women From Venus in the bathroom by the toilet. I doubt you've picked it up. But if memory serves right, that's one of the biggest things between men and women. Women like to talk about their process. Men don't, and only say when they've made a decision. Women don't want to make a decision a lot of the time or don't need help with the decision. They just like to talk about it. And men don't understand that. So women feel like men are trying to fix them when they're trying to solve their problems, and men feel like women are...
That is solving the problem.
Right. Is that women aren't getting anywhere by just sort of yakking about, the muck.
Fun fact, you need both.
You do. Well, that's why men need male friends and women need female friends, too, because it's not like everything's always going to be the same, but I think that you like to be included in my process, and I mean, I don't know. Not all men do. That's true. Not all men do, I'm sure. But men feel it's like an insult to them or something, it seems like, to include someone in the process. So it's an interesting thing. Not isolated. So
You're not alone. Everyone has communication problems.
But you're right, assuming the best. Most of us are assuming the worst. Assuming the best about the source that it came from is always helpful. That's his point, I think, about having compassion, seeing the person as a human, understanding, and listening rather than from your own pain for their pain and their filter rather than your own. Mm-hmm. What is this person really telling you? And it probably has very little to do with you. But in our closest relationships, it's hard not to take personally. Or know how to help. I think that's I don't know how to help when you're really upset.
Neither do I.
Yeah. Well, that's a skill set you have to build. I think mine's gotten a lot better than it used to be. I mean, my old coping skills were, cutting and drinking. I don't think that's very...
I have a lot of preventative skills. I don't have a lot of skills after it's happened.
You don't have a lot of coping yourself through emotions, and that's practice. I had to learn that because my coping skills were so severely destructive. I was forced to seek out other remedies, and it's not like I've mastered perfection, but learning how to calm yourself down, learning how to not escalate, and all that stuff, like, those are skill sets, and very few people are taught those.
Preventative. I don't have much in the moment. I have a massive threshold to get there.
But you must have, we said, suppressed frustration and pain that when you do get there, you get there
Yes.
intensely. It doesn't always match the circumstance.
No.
So we're going to figure out ways to help get that out in a healthy way.
Yep.
And hopefully you can start to teach me how to be more supportive about it and helpful.
And I hope to be able to express that to you.
I know you will. And the dog always sits here with us. Until we fight, then he vanishes.
Then he comes back. You guys
Then he
okay?
comes back, yeah. You guys are getting better now?
Hi,
You're
buddy.
sitting on my tootsies. You're so soft. You're such a good doggy. All right. Good night.